I'm Dan Gamache. I work at King Soundworks in Los Angeles, and I am the supervising sound designer and re-recording mixer for Knightfall. I got involved with sound effects in college. I went to Emerson College and studied sound design there. Prior to that, I grew up playing a bunch of instruments and playing around with recording equipment, and sort of knew that I wanted to be involved in sound and sound recording and sound editing and manipulation and mixing relatively early on. And so in college, I was making a lot of movies with friends and came out to Los Angeles and kind of decided to go full steam and try and do it professionally. And I fell in with the crew at King Soundworks relatively early on and got involved just helping other guys with the sound effects, and sort of took it from there, and now I'm supervising my own shows. So I prepare for a show like this just by watching a lot of the work that's been done before. I grew up watching Kevin Costner in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and which actually King Soundworks partners had done the sound effects for. So I've actually gotten to use some of those sound effects in Knightfall. So most of the actors in the show are wearing different types of armor, whether that be chainmail. The Templars tend to be wearing a lot of chainmail and leather armor. The French Guard and the French troops tend to be wearing more plate armor, with other leather pieces and chainmail attachments. That's a combination of Foley performing a lot of that stuff, and then also sound effects helping to really bring it to life. On set, the microphones don't pick up a lot of the arm movement, and so in order to give the actors' movements a lot of life when they're handling prisoners or fighting, a lot of the armor sounds are added in post-production. So I approach each individual skirmish or battle in a different way. There always seems to be some sort of overarching calamity that's happening whenever they're fighting, whether it's a rainstorm or a church is burning down or a castle is being sieged. So there's always some sort of external thing that's happening on top of the principal action. And so it's a lot of making sure that there's a through line to the story, and you know which characters are where and who's coming from where, but then also having a sense of chaos, but also a sense of clarity within that chaos, so that the audience knows how the story is progressing and who's winning and who's losing the battle. We use a lot of the location sound in post. The tracks that we get are really, really good. The production recordist does a fantastic job. It's really a great starting point and sort of springboard to work with for us to really amplify things and embellish them in post-production. So whether that be the swords or any of the environments that they're in, and these great castles or dungeons and towers and forests and things like that. Creating a battle scene takes a lot of time. It obviously depends on how long the battle goes on, but maybe for a 3-minute battle, it takes at least a day to go through and do all the layers. There's obviously all the principal fighting that happens, the swords, the punches, the grabs, and there's sort of a general bed of the either hundreds or dozens or thousands of people fighting around them, and then it always gets further complicated when there are horses involved or catapults and any sort of other mechanized weaponry. There's a lot of Foley and a lot of sound effects in Knightfall. Part of it is to keep the environments alive and keep the show feeling really, really gritty. The Foley guys have done such a fantastic job. We spoke at length before the show started about the footwear that the different characters were wearing. They didn't have modern shoes or really hard-soled shoes. They were sort of leather-bound footwear. And then the Templars' footwear is slightly different from what the King wears and the Prince wears and the boots that his troops are wearing in the castle, where they have sort of a small wood sole. And so I worked with them to try and find a nice sound for the two different sides, the good and the bad, of how those sounded. And then I worked to mix them into the space to give them the sense that they were in these large, cavernous throne rooms or sort of different council chambers or mess halls or wherever they might be. They use a lot of different weapons in Knightfall. There are swords, there are axes, there are flails and maces and daggers and crossbows and longbows. And those all obviously have to have a different sound. And sometimes in the cacophony of the battles, we need to help the audience understand with all of these tight shots of the fighting, who is who and what's happening and whether a sword blow hit armor or flesh. Some of those may sound a little thuddier. Some of those may, clang and ring out in a different way, and others may hit leather, they may hit chainmail, they may hit plate mail, they may hit flesh, they may hit cloth, they may miss and hit the dirt. So on set, the horses aren't the main focus of the recordist. It's the actors and the dialogue. And so the sound of the horses is almost entirely done in post-production. Foley only covers the main bridle movements and maybe some leather saddle movement when people are getting on or off, but the rest of it is all sound effects. The hooves, the armor that the horses are wearing, their breaths, their neighs, their whinnies, their snorts, their blows is all added in post-production. Sometimes they use a prop horse when an actor is riding on it for close-ups, and other times in the background it'll be a sort of a doll because real horses are making a lot of movement and noise in the background, and it can become a distraction. So it's my job to then add in the noise where we want it in the scene, and so that's adding any sort of vocalizations and bridle movement. My experience with horses started when I was young, and I rode for a few years, and my sister rode equestrian for quite a while, and so I grew up going to the barn with her. Now that she's older, she's a hippotherapist, and so whenever I visit her in Massachusetts, I spend time at the barn around the horses, and I'm always just aware that they are always moving, always making noise, and I try and use that experience to bring the horses to life in the show, whether they be real horses or props or an actor just standing on a ladder. And then I also keep that in mind when I'm doing a scene in a courtyard or something where there are horses in the medium background or distant background, or when they're in Paris and they're off in the city, trying to always find a place to remind, to give people a nice reminder that there are no cars, that people get around with horses and different animals like that. Thanks for watching. I'm Dan Gamache, supervising sound designer at King Soundworks. I hope you enjoy watching Knightfall.